All right, y'all. So got a lot of time on my hands today. It's a day off, so I had a chance to record some videos and watch a few fights. And shout out to Coach, man. Shout out to CSH Combat Sports. If you ain't subscribed to the Coach, make sure you subscribe. But he did a video talking about y'all know this flyweight prospect everybody's riding high on, Wang Cong, and I definitely agree with a lot of his points. But I just wanted to kind of go back and talk about it over here because yeah, there were some things that I do see in Wang Kong that will help move her forward. So, whenever I see somebody like Wang Kong come through and, lose the way she did, but at the same time, see her bounce back with the win over Bruna Brazil, and even go back and look at the fight with Gabriela Fernandez and see the good things that she was doing. And, I spent most of the day just watching her fights. I mean, she doesn't have that many, but I did watch all of them minus one. And I have to say that, Wang Kong, she still has a lot of potential. There's still hope for Wang Kong in the flyweight division. I mean, when you look at her and how she lost, it wasn't like she got totally exposed, like, oh, she had terrible striking, or she has this glass chin, or she just has no ground game. She didn't have none of those things were said. It was just basically a mental thing. It was a lack of focus, in my opinion, or overconfidence. So when I go back and look at what Wang Kong was doing in a lot of her previous fights, and even in the fight that she lost, yeah, I still have to say there's a lot of hope there. There's still a lot of hope because what I see in her versus some of the other flyweights have been getting signed, and you see some of them lose. I have to say there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with those girls. But when I look at Wang Kong, you know, um, not trying to overrate her, I think she still has the skills to become well rounded. She has the drive to become well rounded. Just watching how she, handles some of her fights, whether it be, in the clinch or in the striking, which is still main her forte, is her striking. I think she still has a lot going for her. I mean, when I look at her strengths, I just want to look at her strengths and weaknesses here as well. But when I was watching some of her fights, like this one at UAE against this girl, what's her name? Amanda, I believe. I was watching this one first, and I have to say, one of the standout things about her is, her pressure is really effective. It was effective in some of her UFC fights, of course, but going back and look at some of her other fights, like against this girl, Wu Yanan, some of the girls that she went distance with, she has effective pressure. They tend to go on the back foot and they feel that pressure, and she puts them in positions where they can't really get off solid shots. And when you look at what she's able to do behind that effective pressure, just her striking in general, it's damaging. I think her strikes are solid. She's a solid striker. From the punches to the kicks. I like how she sets up to the jab to the body. Me, I love the jab. Like, she's just not like some type of wild swinger looking for the knockout. For the most part, she's trying to set it up. And when she's jabbing to the body like that, she's trying to open up spaces. So when I look back at some of her previous fights now, I'm like, all right, like, that's the type of game that she needs to set up more. Don't just try to go in there for the one punch knockout. I know it came fast against Victoria Leonardo, but that's Victoria Leonardo. Not every knockout's going to come fast. So I think when I see a fighter like Wang Kong, sticking to like effective pressure, jabbing to the body, and even, the inside leg kicks, that just kind of needs to be her game. If the knockout comes, it comes. But her striking overall, it is effective where she can break opponents down till the knockout comes. Or if it don't come, puts her ahead like it did in these fights against Wu Yanan and this girl here, Adaya, at UAE. The knockout didn't come, but man, she was really beating these girls up because she was hitting them with some solid shots on the inside. She never ignores the body too. That's another plus about Wang Kong. She doesn't ignore the body. The left hook she's throwing on the inside has power to it. Everything she's throwing is heavy handed. It's heavy. And she's not like over committing. Only when she gets excited will she try to overcommit. But for the most part, I see Wang Kong just kind of marching girls down, or even just fighting at a controlled pace. Like in a couple of these fights, she just was keeping keeping the range, keeping the distance, and then she would step in behind a leg kick, or she would throw a body kick and come back with a right hand, or she would throw a right hand and go up top with a head kick. Just the way her body's positioned, like she can kind of mix it up from a right hand to a head kick. So she's really dangerous on the feet. So that's one thing that Wang Cong has going for her. Like she's just not like this wild brawler or this one hit wonder when it comes to her striking. I think her level of striking in the unranked realms is probably the best right now. When you look at the fighters she's up against, Carly Giudice, I think she's a good fighter. She's a volume striker. I think she's one that's proven, in somewhat in that area. But I think when it comes to like just distance and just overall mechanics and variety, I would say Wayne Kong has that. Another thing, when I was looking at her fights, she is strong. Wayne Kong is big. She's not like this wiry, lanky type of flyweight. She has some muscle to her and she's strong in the clinch. I saw her holding her own in a couple clinches, stuffing some Wuyanan takedowns and, just using her size. I think she's able to use her size. She's gone the distance. So I can say her gas tank looked pretty decent, So with some of those things that she was doing in these previous fights, I think she just needs to carry it over here to the UFC, and work towards being more of a complete fighter. Again, I know it comes down to the competition she's getting, and we have been seeing her use it against, some of these opponents, like again, Gabriela Fernandez. Again, just kind of like the lack of focus was there, right? Some of the things I would say is her weak points is she is a little flat-footed. She is a little flat-footed in there. She's kind of like Triple G in boxing. Whenever she is coming forward. Now, when she's dealing with faster fighters and fighters a little bit more nimble on their feet, they'll be able to chew up that lead leg, or they'll be able to step out at angles and get a read on her striking and even time her. So that is kind of one of her weaknesses. Even like Coach said, is like counter strikers. She's dealing with somebody like a Rose Namajunas, Manon Fior, Valentina, the higher level strikers here that can time, even somebody like Alexa Grasso and Natalia Silva. As time goes on, these counter strikers, they'll be able to get a read, or they'll be able to get out of the way of some of these heavy shots and even chew her lead leg up, like I was saying. So yeah, that's something that she needs to kind of be aware of when she's in the pocket with, fellow strikers. Number two, I'll say is defense. Defense is another thing. That's something with a lot of these girls. So like some of these girls are just like to lead with their head, or they forget that they need to keep their hands up. Somebody like Wang Cong, when she's in full control of a fight, I think she gets into a habit of dropping her hands, thinking that shots aren't going to come back, but they do. They do, and she learned that from Gabriela Fernandez. She kept coming forward on Gabby, didn't think Gabby was going to throw anything. Gabby hits her with a head kick, followed by a straight left hand that dropped her. So just need to see Wayne Kong keep it a little bit more tighter with her defense upstairs, even move her head a little bit just to kind of throw some girls off. Because I think, again, like it'll come down to counter strikers, even some wrestlers with good overhand rights. Once they know that head is on the line, they'll just, dive in and they'll swing for the fences and they'll catch her because there's not much defense there, right? Again, I know that when you're used to coming forward and just dictating the pace, you don't think you have to move, or you think you don't have to make certain adjustments, but it's going to come down to getting out of your comfort zone and getting used to that when you're dealing with better strikers, or high level strikers in there, right? Another thing I would say is probably her biggest weakness is just maybe being a little overconfident, thinking that she's always in charge in a fight. And if that doesn't happen in a fight, I think that's where her downfall comes in, where, she starts to lose focus or try to play catch up, or, maybe she's looking to the crowd thinking that, oh man, I'm not living up to my hype, so I got to go in there and get this knockout. That's kind of what she had against Gabby. She just wanted to go after it. The Bruno Brazil fight, I know she got hit a couple of times in that one. The head was wide open. I believe she did get hit with some head kicks in that fight. Again, I think maybe it was just feeling like, oh, I can walk through certain shots. But as the competition gets tougher here, man, like again, that ties into defense. Like you gotta stay calm and cool, like because not every fight is gonna end your way. Like sometimes opponents, they'll bite back. They're gonna bite back, and that's something I give credit to fighters like Manon Fior and like Natalia Silva. People think that, oh, they're boring, or oh, they just drag a fight out, or they're just kind of losing focus. No, like they know if the knockout isn't coming, they just kind of play it safe, get the victory and take it on home. And that's what you got to do sometimes. If not, you're going to get it snatched. You're going to be laying on your back. All right. So I think that might be one thing that she just needs to look out for moving forward in the UFC, because a lot of these girls now in the top 10 that you're looking at, you dealing with fighters that are well-rounded, and they're gonna be looking to land something big on you. You ain't got too many of the best strikers in between like 7 and 15, but some of those girls, they can land something on you if you're not moving your head, you don't have the defense, you flat-footed, or you're a little overconfident, right? So yeah, man, I think Wang Cong, seeing what she's able to do, I think that knockout with that finish, that submission loss against Gabriela Fernandez was just kind of like a wake-up call for her. I believe it was just a little wake-up call, and she can bounce back from it. Because again, like I said, it didn't really tell me that she had a bad ground game, because she got knocked down and she was foggy, so she got submitted, because she was just out of it. But that didn't really tell me, oh, her striking is bad, because again, her mechanics that leading up to that point, she was winning the fight. Good body shots, head kicks, whatever. She's always mixing it up. It was just more of I think, an overconfidence thing. And again, that focus was broken because she wasn't going to get the knockout like she wanted. So moving forward, I do think that she'll have a top 15 spot at some point, maybe by the end of this year. I think she just needs to be tested. She needs to be tested against I want to see her in there with some ground fighters that have striking as well. But I just want to see the ground game actually tested as well in this fight. And that's another thing on Wang Cong. Yeah, her ground game ain't that bad. It's not really that bad. It really hasn't been tested either, because she only has one submission win in that road to UFC. But other than that, it still needs to be tested. Like, I want to see how she handles like pressure from fighters that can go 3 rounds, or fellow strikers, like a high volume striker that's going to take a shot to give a shot, like Carly Giudice. That's a good fight. Ernest Karaskatai. Those are good big fights right there. So I'd like to see her in there with maybe like 1 or 2 more unranked fights. But this is what I'm telling you right now. This is what I can see the UFC probably doing. Like, they're trying to push Wang Cong, right? If they are still trying to push her, I could see them giving her Kareem Silva. Well, first of all, I could see them giving her Ariane Lipsky, Casey O'Neill, or Kareem Silva. I can see them trying to get her up there into the top 15 pretty fast still, even though, she faced that loss against Gabriela Fernandez. One of those 3 names she might get if the UFC is trying to get her in there as quick as possible. That now she's moving up in age and so on. But me personally, I think that her next fight should be somebody like a bigger unranked grappler that's going to test her and kind of go from there. But yeah, to me, I don't think there's any rush. I think she can catch up with what she's working with. Just give her the time, because these girls are becoming more complete out there, and I think Wang Cong does have that potential to be, somewhere in the top 7 or even a possible contender. She just keeps on working her game out. I can see kind of like the grind, like a Wei Li in her, where she's taking her game seriously. She's not just going in there being one-dimensional. I think that as time goes on, she'll learn that, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do, so I can see that. And then she's got the star power, the potential star power. She's got a country that would love to see her rise up, and, her marketing skills as far as her act, she's the Joker, right? She loves being called the Joker. But if she wants to continue to wear that, she's going to have to keep growing as a fighter and evolve, because if she wants to stay the Joker, got to work on that game, or she'll wind up being the joke.